Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Eye of the Beholder. In today's video, we're going to finish out the Beast Minis. Let's jump right in. The elephant, in real life, the largest land creature on Earth, native to Africa, India, and Asia. In D&D world, a formidable foe still, but also a medium-large meal for a passing rock, dragon, or dire wolf pack. Both the elephant and his prehistoric cousin, the mammoth, originated in the OG Monster Manual. We get our first and only elephant in 2018's Waterdeep Dragon Heist set. Obviously, this is not a wild beast. This elephant has been blinged out. Golden face mask that also covers part of the ears and trunk, along with the draping along the body. Note the two-tone red on one side, gold on the other. A gray pad and brown riding basket completes the look. The detail on this mini is very nice. Note the straps that hold the basket and trunk shield. Also, extraordinary detailing on the gold side of the draping. Look closely, you'll appreciate it. Playability is solid as well. The riding basket can easily hold one medium or two small minis. Score: Paint 25, Pose 18, Playability 20, Pizzazz 25, for a score of 88. A couple of years later, in 2020's Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden set, we get our only mammoth, not counting the Frost Giant and Mammoth Snowbound Premium set. Not nearly as detailed as the previous pachyderm, it's still a solid mini. Uniform brown with white tusks, this mini is a must-have for any Arctic adventuring. Like many beast minis, the pose, with foreleg raised and head held high, indicate an imminent attack. Score: Paint 13, Pose 13, Playability 15, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 56. Next up are our equines, with both the horse and mule listed in the original Monster Manual. Both are essential in D&D as they were in the real world right up until Mr. Ford made them obsolete. From the petite pony being ridden by a halfling to the daunting warhorse of a paladin, horses are ubiquitous in D&D, found in every city, town, and village, and in every climb from scrubland to tundra. We get our first horse in 2007's Desert of Desolation set. The mini is called a warhorse, but I'm not seeing it. With its brown fur and white lower legs, this guy looks like he should be pulling a Budweiser wagon. It's not a bad mini, just misnamed, as both the paint and the sculpt are well done. I'd use it more in a farm rather than a battle setting. Score: Paint 18, Pose 16, Playability 9, Pizzazz 12, for a score of 55. Now we get a true warhorse 16 years later in the Dragonlance War of the Dragon Queen set. Fully kitted out in chainmail barding, I especially like the detail of the sheathed longsword on its right side. While the paint is nothing special, mostly brown and silver with a black tail, the posing is much more dynamic than the previous warhorse. Playability is solid and it's pretty cool, so score is Paint 16, Pose 20, Playability 18, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 71. Our final equine mini comes from 2020's Fangs and Talons set, the lowly pack mule. Let's call him Bill. Everything is spot on for this mini. The paint has a nice color palette and is highly detailed. Note the delicate work on the tack and pack bindings. Pose is exactly correct for what it is. Playability is high for any party who needs a draft animal. Pizzazz? I know, it's a mule. But I've been looking at this mini for 5 minutes now and I can't find a flaw, so the lowly pack mule is our first common mini to get a perfect 100 score. Moving away from hearth and home, welcome to the jungle. Lions and tigers and panthers? Oh my. Felines are stealthy, aggressive, and for the most part, solitary predators. Great for wilderness encounters, there's nothing like a sudden tiger attack to break up the monotony of a long rest for the PCs. For extra fun, make it a dire tiger. Our first feline mini is the hunting cougar from 2006's War Drum set. Fun fact, a panther can drag twice its weight up a tree. A cougar can drag someone half her age into bed. Oh wait, sorry, wrong cougar research. Not much to say here. The tan coloring is species correct, the pose is properly threatening, and playability is solid in any outdoor setting. Score: Paint 13, Pose 13, Playability 16, Pizzazz 11, for a score of 53. Lions are the exception to the solitary jungle cat, preferring to hunt in packs or prides, consisting of an alpha male and several females and cubs. This lion, from 2018's Waterdeep Dragon Heist set, is about what you'd expect from a male lion mini. Paint as pose is what you'd expect, and as WizKids has yet to create any female lion minis, you can use 3 or 4 of the previous cougar minis with this guy to get your pride. Score: Paint 12, Pose 12, Playability 15, Pizzazz 12, for a score of 52. Two years later, we get our second lion in 2020's Mythic Odysseys of Theros set, called a Fleecemane lion. As Theros is a realm highly based on Greek mythology, this mini could easily be a stand-in for the Nemean lion slain by Hercules in one of his 12 tasks. Larger than the previous lion mini, its gray-white mane and matching tail tip stand out. The pose shows off the musculature very well. Standing tall, head high, and in mid-roar, this guy definitely has King of the Jungle vibes. Score: Paint 18, Pose 20, Playability 15, Pizzazz 22, for a score of 75. Just like with other beasts, there are dire lions. All the usual traits apply: bigger, stronger, more ferocious, etc. Unfortunately, our first dire lion mini from way back in the Dragon Eye set of 2003 is none of those things. It's the same size as a regular lion mini and has no bony protrusions that mark it as dire. I guess it gets a bit of a pass from being such a very early mini, but if I use it, it will be as a regular lion. Score: Paint 12, Pose 15, Playability 10, Pizzazz 9, for a score of 46. Four years later, WotC gets it right in the Blessed Hunter mini from the Unhallowed set. Great pose, catching it in mid-spring with mouth wide agape, great detailing on the fangs. And there's my bony protrusions. Brown body, browner mane with white protrusions and fangs complete the paint palette. Playability is high. What a perfect mini to use as a wandering monster attack on your PCs, springing from the high grass. Score: Paint 18, Pose 23, Playability 16, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 77. The giant lynx is another OG Monster Manual beastie, preferring colder climates as its habitat. They are highly intelligent and have their own language that wood elves and some druids can understand. Our one and only giant lynx comes from 2023's Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants set. The most striking feature is its blue hide with black stripes, which is actually color correct for this creature. Pose shows the lynx intently focused on something, ears pricked high and back slightly arched. Really amazing detailing on the face and head, by the way. Score: Paint 17, Pose 19, Playability 10, Pizzazz 17, for a score of 63. Panthers are closely related to cougars, although much more prone to hunting at night. We get our first and only true panther in 2005's Underdark set. Although this is not quite true. Meet Gwynwyver, loyal companion to the drow legendary adventurer Drizzt Do'Urden. Way too much backstory to cover here, so let's just focus on the mini. Solid black as it should be, white claws and yellow eyes complete the look. Caught in mid-spring makes for solid pose and playability, so score is paint 15, pose 20, playability 15, pizzazz 24, he is a legend after all, for a score of 74. Due to their nocturnal activities, panthers do sometimes wander about the Shadowfell. Spending too much time there results in their transformation to spectral panthers, which, along with giving them the ability to become incorporeal, also gives them a preference for humanoid flesh. We get our only spectral panther in 2008's Dungeons of Dread set. Silvery gray body gives off an incorporeal vibe, with yellow eyes the only hint of color. And technically wrong, eyes are supposed to be black. Pose shows the panther swiping at its prey, so we do have some kinetic movement in the pose. Score: paint 10, pose 12, playability 12, pizzazz 14, for a score of 48. Tigers are the last of our big cats, another original Monster Manual beastie. Y'all know what tigers do, so I'm not going to get into it. The interesting thing that neither WotC nor WizKids have produced any tiger minis, and our only dire tiger comes from 2007's Night Below set. Great coloring on this mini, very tiger-esque. I also really like the pose. Low to the ground in preparation of springing at its prey. As an early, rare mini, playability is low, but if you have a dire tiger encounter to run, this is your only option. Score: paint 18, pose 19, playability 8, pizzazz 14, for a score of 59. Next up on our bestiary is the giant frog. Weighing in at around 250 pounds and with a tongue that can strike out 20 feet, these creatures are actually quite dangerous for a low-level party. Well camouflaged, they prefer to ambush their prey, striking with their tongues to capture and, if the prey is small enough, looking at you halfling PCs, swallow them whole. FYI, fire is a great deterrent against giant frogs. We get our first giant frog in 2005's Death Knell set. It's a bit on the comical side, with its bug eyes, extended tongue, and teeth? D&D frogs have teeth? But despite all this, I kinda like it. Uniform green body with yellow eyes, poses what you'd expect from a frog, and playability is solid. You'll definitely need a few of these for any swamp encounters for atmosphere and potential wandering monster encounters. Score: paint 13, pose 11, playability 15, pizzazz 18, for a score of 57. Our next giant frog, from 2016's Storm King's Thunder set, is much more anatomically correct, but somehow less fun than the WotC version. Slightly smaller than its predecessor, coloring is uniform green with black for the eyes. Pose is also the same as the previous frog. Really, there's nothing about this mini to distinguish it. Myself, I would have posed it in mid-spring with just its back feet touching the base. Score: paint 9, pose 11, playability 8, pizzazz 6, for a score of 34. Next up is the mountain goat. Highly territorial alpine denizens, their thick coat and thick layer of fat protect them from the harsh elements. Having your PCs encounter one of these guys on a narrow mountain pass can lead to everything from comical to tragic outcomes. Oddly enough, we get 2 mountain goat minis in 2020 and none since. From 2020's Mythic Odysseys of Theros set, we get the Nyx Fleece Ram. As with most beasts of this realm, this one differs quite a bit from your standard mountain goat, with purple and white fur. Note the different color fur on each foreleg. The large horns are also quite a statement. You definitely don't want this guy getting up to ramming speed. Score: paint 19, pose 12, playability 14, pizzazz 18, for a score of 63. We get our second mountain goat also in 2020 in the Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden set. What this guy loses in pizzazz to the previous mini makes up for in accuracy. The white-gray coloring is pitch perfect, and while the pose is what you would expect, I really like how WizKids added a bit of a rock outcropping to the base. Really, either of these minis are playable. I would use the Ram as an alpha male with several of these minis as its mates. Score: Paint 15, Pose 16, Playability 14, Pizzazz 13, for a score of 58.
Insects. Ugh. These six-legged creepy crawlies are icky enough in real life, ants getting in your sugar bowl or cockroaches under the fridge. But in D&D, insects go beyond icky to straight up terrifying. Ranging in size from, well, insects, to larger than a horse, encounters with insects can range from annoying to TPKs. Approach nests and hives with caution.
We get our first insect in 2004's Aberrations set. Called a fiendish giant praying mantis, this creature likes to lie in wait for its prey, reaching out to grab an unsuspecting victim with its front pincers and tearing into them with its mandibles. This mini is pretty colorful for an older mini, lighter green for the body with touches of black, white, red, and orange. The pose also conveys its ambush nature, crouched low with his abdomen raised as if he's about to spring, pincers at the ready. Score: Paint 22, Pose 20, Playability 15, Pizzazz 19, for a score of 76. Surprisingly enough, a favorite prey of the giant praying mantis is the giant stag beetle, which we get in 2006's Blood War set. Despite their size, these beetles are largely herbivores and are a huge problem when they build their nests in farming areas, as they will fight to the death to defend them. This mini is a solid representation, solid black with a dark red carapace. The posing is correct, really showing off the very large set of mandibles, and playability is solid either as a lone wandering monster or, if you have enough, a nest that needs wiping out. Score: Paint 11, Pose 14, Playability 15, Pizzazz 15, for a score of 55. Next up is our first swarm, the Rot Scarab Swarm from 2007's Desert of Desolation set. Not found in any book that I have, this mini was strictly an invention for the miniatures game. It attacks by attempting to envelop and stun its target, then devour it while it's stunned. Think the scarabs in the Mummy movies. The fun ones with Brendan Fraser, not that Tom Cruise BS. The mini itself is pretty uniform black with little to no detail. Playability is about zilch unless you have the original playing card denoting its stats. Then it could be a nice surprise to spring on your PCs. Score: Paint 3, Pose 3, Playability 7, Pizzazz 3, for a score of 16. Our next insect mini comes from 2009's Monster Manual Dangerous Delve set, The Blood Scarab. Another miniature game creation, the Blood Scarab prefers being underground and can burrow just as fast as it can move through open air. It has the ability to create an aura that weakens its victims before moving into attack. The mini itself is pretty good, black and red while depicted waiting on a ledge or a rock outcropping. It's also nondescript enough to be used as a stand-in for any giant beetle. So, score: Paint 10, Pose 12, Playability 9, Pizzazz 11, for a score of 42. We get the Horde Scarab Larva Swarm from 2009's Monster Manual Legendary Evils set. Set in the Forgotten Realms milieu, this mini was definitely inspired by the Fraser Mummy movies. In its dormant state, it looks like a coin, and as such tends to hide among treasure piles waiting to be picked up by the unwary. If you've seen the movie, you know the rest. Mini-wise, again, though if you look really closely, you can see specific details on the coins. Score: Paint 4, Pose 6, Playability 10, Pizzazz 4, for a score of 24. The rock grub swarm is another creature from the OG Monster Manual, and the mini from 2010's Lords of Madness set is pretty good swarm-wise. Another creature that wants to burrow into your flesh and lay its eggs. The mini itself is a basic brown with dark wash for highlighting. As swarms go, this is the most playable of the lot, so the overall score for this mini is Paint 10, Pose 8, Playability 13, Pizzazz 9, for a score of 40. WizKids gives us their first insect mini in 2016's Monster Menagerie set. The giant fire beetle is the smallest of the giant beetles, generally only about 3 feet long. While their pincer attack can be dangerous, they are most known for the luminous gland set above each eye, which will continue to glow for several days after the death of the beetle, making them a nice replacement for torches. The mini, however, doesn't do a very good job conveying fire beetle. There is no hint of the glands that give the beetle its name, lowering paint and playability. Score: Paint 8, Pose 12, Playability 8, Pizzazz 5, for a score of 33. We get our next insect mini in 2021's The Wild Beyond the Witchlight set, which makes sense as giant dragonflies are used as mounts in this city. When not domesticated, however, they are voracious and territorial, perfectly capable of flying off with a human-sized victim. That being said, the mini itself is a bit underwhelming, with a monochrome blue body and translucent wings that just seem small for its capabilities. I can't really see this mini picking up anything larger than a Shih Tzu. Mounted on a clear base to give the illusion of flight is nice, though. Score: Paint 7, Pose 11, Playability 12, Pizzazz 7, for a score of 37. (2022's) Fizban's Treasury of Dragon gives us another horde scarab, but a singular creature rather than a swarm. Not sure how this could ever be mistaken for a coin. It's too big, which completely ruins its playability. Properly golden color and low to the ground, maybe you can pretend it's pretending to be a golden buckler. Really, WizKids, why bother? Score: Paint 12, Pose 5, Playability 1, Pizzazz 9, for a total of 27. We get our next swarm in 2023's Sand and Stone set, Swarm of Insects, Beetles. Good God, just make it stop. Another underwhelming mini that has little to no playability. Honestly, its shiny black paint with absolutely no details does nothing to convey a swarm of anything, much less beetles. As a DM, the only use that I can think of for this mini is as a pool of oil or tar for the party to use or avoid as they see fit. Paint 5, Pose 2, Playability 2, Pizzazz 4, for a score of 13. Thankfully, Sand and Stone also gives us our last swarm, the Swarm of Insects, Wasps. By my count, it's 11 wasps, but I guess that's a swarm. It's okay paint-wise, yellow body and black wings, and the pose is solid. As I mentioned with the Swarm of Bats mini from earlier, this would have been much more effective as a large mini with many more wasps on the edge of the base to allow it to envelop a medium-sized mini. Score: Paint 12, Pose 10, Playability 8, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 40.
Lizards. We get a couple lizard minis, one each from WotC and WizKids. D&D lizards are no different from what we have in real life, just bigger, scarier, and hungrier.
Our first lizard mini is a monitor lizard from 2005's Underdark set. A two-tone green with a dark wash to give it shading, it's definitely giving off Komodo dragon vibes. I like how WotC has the lizard posed atop a rock outcropping, which gives it depth. A small quibble: it would have been nice if the mini had a flickering tongue, but probably too fragile to do properly. Oh well. Score: Paint 16, Pose 17, Playability 14, pizzazz 14, for a score of 61. 17 years later, we get our next lizard, the giant lizard from 2023's Season Shore set. Giant lizards can be found in all environments, can climb as fast as they run, and can even swim underwater for up to 15 minutes. The pose on this guy gives off agitated vibes. Something has its attention. Paint is a mono green, but there is some excellent face work on this mini. Yellow eyes, red tongue, white spikes. I can definitely see using this mini in a lot of settings, and since lizard men have been known to domesticate them, throw a couple into your next lizardman encounter for flavor. Score: Paint 15, Pose 13, Playability 18, Pizzazz 14, for a score of 60.
Next up are the primates, specifically apes, as there's no chimpanzee or orangutan minis yet. Just like in real life, D&D apes are highly territorial, will attempt to dominate and scare off an opponent before relying on tooth and claw to attack. Unless it's a dire ape, just roll for initiative.
We get our one and only dire ape mini in WotC's second set, 2003's Dragon Eye. Pose-wise, there's a couple interpretations here. It could be a threat display, pounding his chest and letting out a warning howl. Or it could be an attack, fist raised to pound his opponent with jaws agape, ready to tear into flesh. Paint is what you'd expect, various browns with a bit of white for the fangs. Playability is limited by availability, being a rare early mini. Score: Paint 15, Pose 19, Playability 11, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 65. 3 years later, in the War of the Dragon Queen set, we get an unusual ape, the War Ape. In the Forgotten Realms world, some apes have been domesticated enough to use in battle. They are given spiked gauntlets, pointed in direction, and told, crush, kill, destroy. This mini is a perfect representation of that, posed in full charge mode with its fist raised to rain destruction on its enemies. Black body, brown chest, and silver gauntlets are the main colors, and while it's a pretty cool mini, I'm not sure about its playability, so score: Paint 13, Pose 20, Playability 6, Pizzazz 19, for a score of 58.
Rats. They say that, in New York City, you're never more than 20 feet away from one. Not sure if that ratio holds in Greyhawk, Waterdeep, or Palanthas, but it wouldn't surprise me. Alone they are not much of a threat, although a bite can cause disease. A swarm, on the other hand, can be dangerous, as anyone who remembers the old 70s movie Willard can tell you. Then you move on to the giant and dire varieties, again, relatively weak alone, but dangerous in packs. So let's start with the little guys and work our way up.
That being said, this mini from 2007's Unhallowed set is by far the largest of the rat minis. Called a swarm of rats, obviously, it's actually quite detailed for being a mountain of rats. Close examination shows quite a bit of detailing in the swarming bodies. Monochrome brown with hints of white fangs complete the look. I can definitely see using this in any city or underground setting. Playability is sound, so score: Paint 12, Pose 14, Playability 15, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 51. For some reason, WotC decided we needed another rat swarm in 2009's Monster Manual Legendary Evil set. Horrible mini, on par with WizKid's Beetle Swarm. Monochrome black without a hint of eyes or teeth, the pose, as it is, conveys little detail of the individual bodies. I guess if you needed a smaller rat swarm, this is the one to use. Just expect your players to ask, what's that? Score: Paint 5, Pose 5, Playability 7, Pizzazz 2, for a score of 19. Cranium rats are rats psionically enhanced by mind flayers and are used as spies for the illithids. When swarming, their collective intelligence grows large enough to the point of speaking and even spell-like abilities. In 2018's Waterdeep Dragon Heist set, we get this Cranium Rat Swarm, and whiz kids, I implore you, stop making swarm minis, you suck at it. Again, no details at all to make out, and the pink spots, which I suppose are supposed to be the exposed brains, just look like pink spots to me. Score: Paint 7, Pose 4, Playability 9, Pizzazz 4, for a score of 24. 4 years later, WizKid tries again and Mordenkainen presents Monsters of the Multiverse set. Better, WizKids, better. Setting 3 rats on a small base and making it a common makes it possible to get enough of these minis to create your own swarm, and unlike the previous mini, the pink brains are clearly visible. Brown fur and pink tail and paws complete the look. Pose is solid, with each rat clearly defined, and as already mentioned, playability is good, so score: Paint 14, Pose 15, Playability 17, Pizzazz 12, for a score of 58. Before they were given the dire prefix, large rats were called giant rats in the OG Monster Manual. 40 years later, WizKids decided to keep this name in 2017's Monster Menagerie 2 set. Perhaps WizKids had a reason, as this guy is obviously not a dire rat. Brown fur with pink tails, paws, and nose, and no sign of bone spikes or scary fangs to be seen. Playability-wise, just use him as a big rat, I guess. Score: Paint 12, Pose 12, Playability 5, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 39. Now let's get on to true dire rats. We have a few options here, starting with the one in 2004's Giants of Legend set. Now this guy is giving us dire vibes, with a snarl on its face and a bone spike at the end of its nose, and note the red tongue lolling from its jaws. Pose shows a creature about to attack, body tense if ready to spring. Like regular rats, dire rats also run in packs, so you'll want several of these to enhance playability. Score: Paint 14, Pose 15, Playability 15, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 54. Two years later, WotC gives us another dire rat in 2006's War of the Dragon Queen set. Called a diseased dire rat, it is by far the largest of our dire rat minis, actually set on a medium base. He's even more ferocious than his predecessor, more spikes, more snarl, more tongue. Pose-wise, he's up on his hind legs in preparation to attack, mouth wide agape, ready to sink his fangs into some flesh. Score: Paint 16, Pose 17, Playability 12, Pizzazz 15, for an overall score of 60. Another 2 years go by and WotC gives us a third dire rat in 2008's Against the Giants set. Called a ravenous dire rat, he is back to his proper small base to correctly denote size, and as a result, not as scary as the last one. Paint and pose are basically the same as before, just smaller. As WizKids has yet to make a dire rat mini, you'll need to do some searching, but all the WotC dire rats are common, so it shouldn't be a problem. Me, I'd grab one of the diseased dire rats to act as leader, and a mix of the other two to flesh out the pack. Score: Paint 16, Pose 17, Playability 12, Pizzazz 11, for a score of 56.
Reindeer, also sometimes called caribou, are a larger variety of deer. Found in Arctic regions, they are herd animals that will typically choose flight over fight in any situation. If cornered, they can cause damage with their sharp antlers, so if you're hunting them, be forewarned.
We get our only reindeer mini in, appropriately enough, 2020's Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden. This is a very good looking mini, fading dark to light brown from back to underbelly, and excellent detailing on the face and antlers. Playability wise, I guess if your PCs want to roleplay a hunting party it would be usable, but otherwise I'm just using it for background color. Score: Paint 20, Pose 15, Playability 8, Pizzazz 16 for a score of 59.
I couldn't find any reference to a giant snail in any of my monster manuals, although a giant slug does appear in the OG. This seems to be a beastie specific to a certain adventure, so if you want to use it and don't want to get the adventure it does appear in, I would take the slug's attack stats and bump up the AC to take into account the shell.
That adventure is 2021's The Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and the mini comes from the same set. Color-wise, this mini is absolutely glorious. The multicolored shell seems to shimmer with a glossy finish, with the uniform yellow of the snail's body completing the look. Pose-wise, well, it's a snail, but I'm loving the eye stalks. Playability? I don't care. This mini looks way too good to leave on the shelf. I'll figure out a way to get it on the playmat. Score: Paint 25, Pose 18, Playability 12, Pizzazz 25 for a score of 80.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? We get it, Indy, we get it. Like most beasties in D&D, snakes are a lot like in real life, just bigger, more aggressive, more poisonous, and some even have wings. A staple in any environment, it's easy to drop a snake encounter into a dungeon, wilderness, or city setting. Since even the smallest snake may have deadly venom, approach with caution.
We get our first snake in 2006's Blood War set. Called a Fiendish Snake, this snake's thick body, set upon a medium base, is tightly wound upon the base, head raised in a strike position. Black-red body, red eyes, and white fangs complete the look. A versatile mini, playability-wise, so score: Paint 14, Pose 13, Playability 17, Pizzazz 11 for a score of 55. Three years later, we get a Snake Swarm in 2009's Monster Manual Dangerous Delve set. Not the greatest mini, but certainly better than the various crappy insect swarms we've been seeing. Monochrome green in color, but you can actually see some details in the pose. There are 3 snake heads rising from the swarm, and if you look closely, you can even make out a diamond pattern on some of their bodies. Score: Paint 8, Pose 11, Playability 15, Pizzazz 6 for a score of 40. We get our last WotC snake the same year in the Monster Manual Legendary Evil set. Called a Death Rattle Viper, I guess it's a cross between a viper and a rattlesnake. Safe to assume it's extremely venomous. Solid green body with a grayish rattle tail. The pose is unique as the body is coiled about a stalagmite. The scaling is nicely detailed as well. I can definitely see using this guy as a nasty surprise for the PCs. Score: Paint 12, Pose 17, Playability 15, Pizzazz 14 for a score of 60. WizKids gives us a flying snake in 2023's Sand and Stone set. Believe it or not, these guys aren't bad. Found in tropical regions, they are semi-intelligent and can be trained as messengers, delivering scrolls wrapped about their bodies. This mini, set on a small base, is another basic green reptile. Poses what you expect, with the creature's wings displayed to full effect. Definitely can see this guy as a wizard's familiar, upping playability. Score: Paint 9, Pose 12, Playability 16, Pizzazz 11 for a score of 48. Our last snake mini is also from 2023 in the Bigby Presents Glory of the Giant set. Called simply a giant poisonous snake, not really anything to add here. Has the best paint job of all the snake minis, with light green body and darker green spots. The scaling detail is also the best, with the coils of the body clearly defined on the base. Really, I'll mostly be using this mini for my giant snake encounters. Score: Paint 15, Pose 15, Playability 18, Pizzazz 18, for a score of 66.
The Sturge is a tiny magical beast that has been annoying low-level PCs since the beginning. Looking like a cross between a bat and a mosquito, they first appeared in the OG Monster Manual and have been making appearances in every Monster Manual since. These bloodsuckers attack parties in large swarms, attaching themselves to their victims and sucking their blood until sated or killed. You're going to need a lot of Sturge minis to make a decent encounter.
So, of course, the big brains at WotC made the first Sturge in 2006's War of the Dragon Queen and Uncommon. Yeah, idiots. One of the very first tiny minis, the small base and clear stand really does make the Sturge look like it's flying. Paint-wise, nothing special, reddish-brown with a dark wash. Playability again depends on numbers. At the time, I remember these were super expensive on the aftermarket because it was the first, and DMs needed a bunch of them to be playable, driving up pricing. Score: Paint 9, Pose 16, Playability 13, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 48. Two years later, in 2008's Demon Web set, WotC gets it right by giving us a Wait, what? Still uncommon? Okay, this mini is on a clear medium base and stand, giving an excellent illusion of flight. This Sturge is a bright orange with a dark wash, with unfortunately zero detailing on the sculpt. Again, playability is based on quantity, so our score here is Paint 10, Pose 16, Playability 13, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 49. Ten years later, WizKids finally gives us their one and only Sturge Mini in 2018's Monster Menagerie 3, and how about that? It's a common. The first thing you notice about it is how tiny it is compared to the two WotC Sturges. A nice touch from WizKids is how they have made the clear stand of the Mini is mounted on in a swirling pattern, alluding to the twisting and turning the beast would do as it attempts to latch onto its prey. What it loses in paint and pose due to its size, it makes way up in playability. It is size correct for what it is, and as a common, you can get a lot of them. So, score: Paint 6, Pose 12, Playability 25, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 48.
Unlike their cousins, the giant frog, giant toads do not need a swampy environment to thrive. A temperate, damp climate suits them just fine, making them perfect for underground encounters such as dungeons or sewers. Giant toads are carnivorous and can swallow prey up to man-size whole. Give them a wide berth, because between their ability to jump a long way plus a tongue that can strike from 10 feet plus, this beastie is closer than you think.
We get our one and only giant toad in 2021's The Wild Beyond the Witchlight set. This is a nicely done mini with a whimsical touch. Like most of the minis in this set, the coloring is varied and detailed. 3 different shades of green on the body, and the pose, how can we not talk about the boots? We catch this toad just as he is finishing his meal. Everything about this mini is finely detailed. The pebbling and warts on the body look good. The eyes look good. Even the boots go as far as to have a heel. Score: Paint 23, Pose 18, Playability 15, Pizzazz 20, for a score of 76.
This brings us to our last class of beasts, the weasel, which also includes badgers and wolverines. Cute, furry, and mischievous in their natural form. Well, except for the wolverine, they are none of those things. But we're not here to talk about the cute ones. Let's talk about the ones that can rip your throat out, the dire versions.
The dire badger is an herbivore who prefers to live alone or in small groups in underground lairs they carve out with their front claws. Well, don't let that fool you, though. Dire badgers are highly territorial and become raging balls of claws and teeth when threatened. We get our first dire badger in 2005's Death Knell set. Called a celestial dire badger, this mini has an excellent paint job for such an early common mini, especially the face and the reddish versus usual white bone spikes. Pose is appropriately badger-like and playability is solid, so this mini gets a score of paint 19, pose 14, playability 13, pizzazz 15 for a score of 61. WizKids gives us their version of the Dire Badger in 2023's Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants, except they called it a Giant Badger. Definitely a rung or two below the WotC version, this one is much smaller than its predecessor, with far less detailing in the coloring and pose. Playability-wise, honestly, I just use this mini as a regular version of the Badger, and grab the WotC version off eBay if you need one. Score: Paint 10, Pose 11, Playability 8, Pizzazz 5, for a score of 34. Weasels are kind of cute. Dire weasels, not so much. Growing up to 10 feet long, they are far more vicious than their smaller cousins and quite willing to attack humanoids as they would regular prey. We get our one and only dire weasel, called a fiendish dire weasel, in 2004's Aberration set. It's tough to make out, but the pose has the weasel standing on a rock outcropping while baring its fangs. Other than that, there's nothing special about the pose, or the paint for that matter. Playability, well, it's an early mini, but it's common, so if you need one, it shouldn't be hard to get. Score: Paint 9, Pose 10, Playability 13, Pizzazz 10, for a score of 42. Our final Beast mini is the Fiendish Dire Wolverine from 2005's Angelfire set. Regular Wolverines are vicious beasts. There's a reason why the greatest football team in history is called the Wolverines. I speak, of course, of the Calumet High School Wolverines from Red Dawn. A regular Wolverine will attack a person. A dire Wolverine will attack a village, often flying into a berserker rage while fighting. Mini-wise, pretty good. Pose low to the ground with fangs bared. The face is well detailed with eyes, fangs, and nose distinct. The paint job of dark brown fur and a row of reddish spikes on the spine complete the look. I like it. Score: Paint 17, Pose 19, Playability 15, Pizzazz 19, for a score of 70.
And that's it for the Beast Minis. Sorry it ran a little long. I just didn't want to do a fourth Beast video. Thanks to all for watching. I always appreciate comments on how to improve the videos or what you'd like to see next. If I decide to continue alphabetically, next up will be quite a catch-all of minis, the Constructs. This is a large subsection of minis. It basically covers everything from wagons to Warforged, golems to Modrons, and everything in between. I'll see you next time on Eye of the Beholder.